Hey, this is David Johnson, running back of the Arizona Cardinals, and you're listening to the Fantasy Footballers Podcast.
Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers Podcast, coming to you from the FantasyJocks.com studios with your hosts, Andy Holloway, Jason Moore, and Mike Wright.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers. It is rumored to be Tuesday, January 24th, 2017. That is merely a rumor.
We're getting near the Super Bowl.
Inching close to the Super Bowl. We are recording this episode on January 18th.
Yeah, so congratulations to
Wait. Well, yeah, you were going to congratulate the teams.
The Green Bay Packers.
Or
the Atlanta Falcons.
Or we'll cut it in afterwards. Press 1 for Atlanta Falcons.
Actually,
no, we're recording this early, and we are at FSTA in Nashville, Tennessee.
We're in Nashville, Tennessee right now.
So, staying near the Country Music Hall of Fame. I know both of you are extreme country fans.
Huge country fan here. I mean, growing up, I was forced to listen to it a lot.
Were you really?
Yes. And I think that is why I do not like country music.
You do not like country.
I'm very excited for the barbecue that I'm probably eating as you listen to this.
So we're doing – this is our Quarterback Truth episode. We're recording this ahead of time. And so we won't have the latest news and notes, the very latest news and notes, but we're gonna hypothesize on what took place over the weekend. So I guess we should do that now. Maybe call our shots.
Yeah, go in the way forward machine and.
Okay.
All right. I'm gonna say this.
That the dream machine?
Well,
Yeah, we're just
those games were amazing this weekend.
the title games.
Oh man,
unbelievable.
Let's start with the
championship
let's
games?
start with the Steelers and the Patriots game because
Can you believe that throw?
that's why Tom Brady. That's why Tom Brady
he's Tom
is
Brady.
a first ballot Hall of Fame.
When the crowd is doing what it was doing, right?
Yeah, I mean
at that point in the game,
Foxborough
at that point in the game, did you think he would be able to do that?
100% I did. That's why they're going to the Super Bowl, right?
He does what he does, man. Does what he does.
This is I'm just gonna. This
Was
is the
it
only thing I'm gonna
was
say.
it a mistake by Tomlin?
I don't think so. I give Tomlin enough respect where I think he can get the
It
job
just
done.
happened.
But I'm gonna go on record and say you don't call that foul there. At the end of the game, you let them play, and I'm on record that I don't think the foul should have been called.
Well, and now you are where you are, and the Patriots have another chance
now,
at a fifth Super Bowl.
The scoring in Green Bay, Atlanta, though, that was the story of the weekend for me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it's hard for me to actually pick one of the plays out because there were so many.
It was so high yet so low.
Right.
It was just there are points being scored from both teams.
If you could have picked one of your favorite quarters of scoring, was it the first,
second quarter? This is
second
the second quarter for sure.
For me, it was the fourth. The way that they came back and made it a game.
Yeah.
I will just say this:
they did.
After that game, now that we know what we know,
right?
Between Aaron Rodgers and Matt Ryan, who's your MVP now?
Well, it's inconsequential.
Of the regular season?
Yeah.
It's still Matt Ryan.
It's still Aaron Rodgers.
Still Aaron Rodgers. Well, look, not much more can be said about those games.
Looking forward to the Super Bowl.
Let's get back to the present.
Oh! It's like I'm falling.
All right. Well, hopefully
There's your news and notes from around the league.
All right, quick question of the day from Matthew Eaton. Considering that AP will be out of Minnesota before his career is over, would you take a chance on him having one great year with his new team before falling off the cliff, or do you never touch him again after this season?
I think for fantasy football, I will take a chance at him depending on his location. If this is real football, I'm not having – if my hometown team wants – and not just because obviously my hometown team has David Johnson, but if we didn't, I would not want the baggage and the price and everything that comes with a one-year rental of Adrian Peterson.
Adrian Peterson is owed $18 million to play for the Minnesota Vikings in 2017. Adrian Peterson is not going to be playing for $18 million.
No, he will have to take a significant pay cut.
Massive pay cut.
Here's what I think, and I'll go on record. This is my opinion, and in our Dynasty League, I had to make this decision, right? Like I made a trade where I let go of Alshon Jeffrey, and I got Jamison Crowder and Adrian Peterson and a move up in our Dynasty draft. I did it on the basis of me believing there's a year left of Adrian Peterson. I think it'll be in Minnesota. I really do. I think he'll take a pay cut.
Do you, as someone who made that trade, do you want Peterson in Minnesota given the legendary suck that was their offensive line and their running game?
Yeah, I think I do.
Okay.
I don't want to mess around with him playing
you're
second fiddle or
historically bad.
Well, but he only had 2 games.
No,
really
not just him, but the entire rushing attack.
No,
yeah, but
would
he have stayed that way? Because he's been good with a bad offensive line before. So maybe he was, if he had played 16 games, I don't think that offensive line would have looked as historically bad.
Maybe you can paint me a picture of another team and scenario that I would like him to go to, but to me they jump out at like, okay, do I really want him in Cleveland? I don't think I really want him in Cleveland more than I do Minnesota.
Right.
Do I really want him? I mean, Washington? Maybe Washington.
Yeah,
I guess if somebody pays him to start, I guess I can live with that.
If it's Minnesota or Washington all day.
Yeah. Okay.
Got a good offensive line.
All right. Well, without further ado, let's talk quarterbacks.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
So, a lot of great feedback on Twitter about these episodes. The focus on the truth at every position, the consistency of players versus their ending ranking. If you haven't listened to previous episodes, we had a couple on running backs, we had a couple on wide receivers, and we'll get into tight ends on Thursday. That being said, we've had some requests for people to they want these rankings, right? They want this data, this information on the website. Do you think Kyle Brooks, do you think they can get some of this done on the website? Mike is shrugging.
I don't know.
You run the company with me. So what do you think?
We can get something. We can get something done.
Get something up there that makes sense, because I think kind of putting all this information into a physical form would be good. But today we're talking about quarterbacks. We're going to go through the rankings. We're going to go as far as we can go on today's show. So I don't know if that means 20 quarterbacks, 15, whatever it is. We'll talk through them. Quarterbacks are one of those positions where, look, you want the locked and loaded starter. You want to not think about it. Do I want to stream quarterbacks? Not really. No, I want.
Yeah, you would rather have Aaron Rodgers this year.
Yeah, or Jason, before the show, we were talking about, you were looking at some data, right, about finishing quarterback. Go ahead and talk about it, because it'll bring up my auto start that I had a few years ago.
Yeah, exactly. So, I wanted to see how our quarterbacks looking, in standard and in 6-point, how did they stack up this year to, the last 5 years? Were they higher? Were they lower? They're pretty much where it's been as far as the first place finish and the 12th place finish in fantasy football.
As far as total fantasy
points scored.
He was checking to see if this was a lower or higher year.
Yeah, I mean, this year was pretty much exactly like last year, a little higher than the few years before that. And you've got this range, right, for standard scoring, where the number one quarterback has somewhere between 340 and 380, fantasy points, right? And then in 6-point, it's a little higher. It's like 430 to 460. And then there was 1 year where I was like, whoa, 519 for Peyton Manning.
Oh, the Denver years?
Yeah. That's what you would prefer rather than stream. You'd just rather get the guy that sets the NFL record for touchdowns, and you go ahead and win the championship on auto lock. I remember after that year, when we came into the 2014 season, I mean, quarterbacks were like, you wanted to trade for a quarterback, you wanted to grab the best one. Same after the Tom Brady year. You overreact to those things. This year was pretty average, and the number one was Aaron Rodgers.
Last year, Cam Newton was the number one quarterback. This year, Cam Newton, despite playing 15 games, is the number 17 quarterback. And so that reality exists for the quarterback position as well. So there's this balance between, most of the time we're recommending streaming because the price you pay to maybe get a top-tier auto-start guy, not always get, maybe get, is too high.
Well, and it's not just maybe you get them. It's the fact that you can replace that production. You can't replace when you have Aaron Rodgers. You can't replace that production. That I acquiesce to this point, but I can replace a top 12 quarterback off of the waiver wire. We talk about this. I believe it was once again 40 quarterbacks finished with a top 12 week. So they're available as opposed to the running backs and wide receivers. They're not widely available. So that's why we always talk about you take the quarterback late because the points that they produce, everyone scores. Every quarterback throws touchdowns. Every quarterback can throw for over 200 yards. Well, maybe not a few of them. Maybe not the
Goff.
Maybe not the Cats in Cleveland and Jared Goff. However, it's a replaceable position, which is why you take them later.
Well, let's talk about the first guy who finished number 1, Aaron Rodgers, because we're talking about the truth of quarterbacks. Are they actually consistent? Did they help you, or did they just have those boom-bust weeks? Aaron Rodgers needs to be talked about on a different level, okay? Because when we're talking about consistency, there's one thing about they were consistent within 2016, but Aaron Rodgers has been consistent forever. I'm looking back, and as you're talking, I wanted to look at where he's finished. I'm going to read you Aaron Rodgers' finishes over the last few years. You guys ready?
I know what they are.
2016, yes. He finished number 1. Now, last year was a down year, right? He still finished number 8, right? He was still a top 12 quarterback, but he also lost his number 1 wide receiver for the whole year.
Right.
He also lost some of the prestige that he had previously by finishing 8.
Exactly. 2014, he finished number 2. 2013, he was dead. He did not play. He was injured. That was his injury.
Well, he played, but that was the collarbone year.
Yeah. 2012, he would finish the second best quarterback. 2011, we're going far back now. He was the number 1 quarterback in fantasy football. 2010, the number 2 quarterback. 2009, the number 1 quarterback. Okay, 2008, the number 3. He is a locked and loaded top guy, and that's why coming into this year, everyone was, is it Cam? And Aaron Rodgers was my number 1. Aaron Rodgers will be my number 1 next year.
40 touchdowns, 4,400 yards, 4 rushing touchdowns, number 1 most consistent quarterback. 12 top 10 performances out of 16 games. Only 1 time did he not finish in the top 21. And he had 6 top 2 performances over the year. Put up a little bit better numbers against bottom 16 defenses, but it was pretty even. His yardage went up against bottom 16 defenses by about 50 yards. And he was over 2 touchdowns a game no matter who he played.
So to be fair, though, I mean, we can't forget the beginning of the season was very frustrating for the Green Bay Packers offense. I remember us frequently talking about what is wrong with Aaron Rodgers, because he's not putting up the kind of numbers that you're used to. I mean, he had that streak dating back to last year where it was, I think, double-digit games without a 300-yard performance.
That's right.
But I think that a lot of that was tied to just the weapons he had available. He didn't have – Jordy Nelson is just so crucial to that offense, what he brings. It makes all the wide receivers on that team better.
All right, so
but
we'll talk a lot more about Aaron Rodgers obviously this offseason, and we'll talk about where he's being drafted and where we would draft him. But him being on another level, going back to 2009, do you make exceptions to your philosophies for Aaron Rodgers, Mike?
No. It depends on what you mean by early. If you're saying, would I grab him in the second round? No, not happening. But a guy like Rodgers that's maybe in the 5th round, maybe, which means
you would never have him.
Yeah, that means
no way
that I'm not – well, most likely. Very, very low probability that he would
One
actually
of
be
the
on
nice things that happened this year is if you look at the average draft position over the last several years at the quarterback position, it plummeted this year. So I don't know if that
You're welcome.
Yeah, exactly.
You're welcome, America.
People are listening more and more and realizing, I don't need to draft quarterback early. That allowed people like Aaron Rodgers to be drafted later. Now, Aaron Rodgers will probably go 2nd round next year. I would be willing to draft him in the 4th, no problem. That would be my stance. If I can get 3 good wide receiver running back to start and then a locked and loaded quarterback who I know is going to be a top 3 type guy, I would be willing.
As of today, Rodgers is going at the back of the 2nd round, Brady and Brees in the 3rd round.
Yep.
And then you actually don't see another quarterback until almost the 5th. So that seems a little lower than we're used to seeing.
Yeah, well, that's right now.
I know.
Once the normal leagues, the regular, the casual players are going, he's going to start going in the 1st round.
Matt Ryan's the number 2 quarterback. He was drafted all the way back at like 140.
Stoodley.
Yeah, so he, almost 5,000 yards, 38 touchdowns. The big number there, 7 interceptions. Look, just a MVP season from Matt Ryan. He was great. He was consistent. He never gave you a performance outside the top 21. He had those big games. And, look, he was just absolutely great. The question for fantasy owners is, is Matt Ryan, did he level up? Right? That's the language we use when we talked about Cam Newton. Did he level up? Is this something you can expect? Obviously, players like Brady and Rodgers and Brees, they reach another level, and they persist at that level. They're the same. Is Matt Ryan going to be drafted? Is he going to be Cam Newton for next year? Is he got the potential for that or not really, because his numbers haven't been, he didn't make an all-time leap.
Right. I don't think he has the Cam Newton level of regression possible, but with Kyle Shanahan getting the wink-wink, nudge-nudge from San Francisco, all signs point to the offensive coordinator Kyle Shanahan moving to San Francisco. And we've seen Kyle Shanahan moving throughout teams throughout the years, making just gems out of quarterback. Ask Matt Schaub what it's like to play for Kyle Shanahan when you lead the league in passing.
Well, and the play calling too, both in the running game and the passing game. I think if Kyle Shanahan is gone, which by now could actually be official, I think there is regression for Matt Ryan.
I was going to say, I want to give you some perspective, and I do want people to remember he played with Kyle Shanahan in 2015.
Right. Yeah, but that's first year.
Right. But I'm not one to just say Kyle Shanahan's the whole reason this happened.
It's touchdowns for me.
Well, it's touchdowns, but look, the average completion for Matt Ryan for his career was 7, 6, 6, 7, 7, 6,
yards
6,
per attempt.
7. This year was 9.26, right?
Yep.
Interceptions, double digits every single year, down to 7 this year. He less than half them. His touchdowns went from 21 to 38. His passer rating in his career, he's a 93 passer rating on average. This year was 117. So that's good and bad, right? That's you're amazing, Matt Ryan. But we like to see it over. Look, Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I just read. He's been
8
consistent.
years.
The thing about Matt Ryan, the regression is coming. I agree with Jason. Matt Ryan has always been lacking touchdowns, which is funny because you look at Julio Jones, superstar. What the biggest knock on Julio Jones for fantasy football is he doesn't get you those elite level of touchdowns. But Matt Ryan you looked at his numbers. This is why he was in our sleeper list in the UDK. He was consistent. The yardage was very high. He just wasn't throwing touchdowns, and that's the number that it can fluctuate. What I like about Matt Ryan, top 16, bottom 16 passing defenses did not matter. He averaged over 300 yards a game.
I'm going to go on record and say that while regression may happen, I still put him in the top 3 quarterbacks.
3?
And I will go on record and say he will not finish as a top 5 quarterback next year.
And that's fine. And the reason is this year you're going to bring back personnel. You got Gabriel and Sanu. You got a maturing Hardy. You have Hooper. Coleman is maturing. Freeman's still young. And then Julio Jones tops the whole thing off, right?
Yeah.
We saw the impact that type of situation always made on Stafford's numbers. So personnel, maturity,
agree.
I'm going to him in the top 3 next year. But
I'm going number 4. How about that? Right in the middle,
so
you guys.
3, 4, 5.
Hey, before we get to the rest of the quarterback truthiness, want to thank today's sponsor, Blue Apron. Foot Clan, listen, Blue Apron is hooking you up. They are making dinner time easy. It is the worst. You get home, the struggle is real. What am I going to make? Blue Apron makes that extremely simple with pre-portioned ingredients for fabulous recipes that you are not coming up with on your own. Just listen to a couple of the meals that are possible. These are available in January. Seared pork chops with farro and cranberry chutney. Spaghetti squash and marinara with mushrooms and garlic knots. Spicy shrimp and Korean rice cakes with cabbage and furikake. Have we nailed down the
That is a Japanese seasoning.
Ow, we got it. We got it this time, America. But look, I'm telling you, all three of us have used Blue Apron.
I got 3 more coming this week.
It's fabulous. It really makes dinner time a lot easier, a lot more fun. Cooking with the family, it really brings the bonds together. So check out this week's menu and get your first 3 meals free with free shipping by going to blueapron.com/ballers. You will love how good it feels and tastes to create incredible home-cooked meals with Blue Apron. So don't wait. That's blueapron.com/ballers. Blue Apron, a better way to cook.
I'm reading the definition of truthiness over here. The quality of seeming or being felt to be true, even if not necessarily true. So I think truthiness may be key to fantasy football trading.
That's a Colbert
It
original.
is a Colbert original, yeah. But I found it humorous that Google actually gave me a official definition.
We got to get
for
ours.
truthiness.
We got to get a word in Oxford. New
Yeah.
life goals.
We do?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Johnny Wahlberg? Wait, no, that's a sorry, that's not. That was spectacular.
That's
all
for
right.
IMDb.
We need to move down because the more
Someone make a new IMDb page.
for Johnny Wahlberg and Johnny John and the Funky Bunch.
All right, so I expect Matt Ryan to regress far more than you two do, but
Okay.
he's been good, very consistent.
You don't get the final word. Matt
Drew Brees.
Ryan's the best. All right, we need to get down into the more highly debated guys. So
Yeah.
Drew Brees was number 3. Demise avoided.
He's
right?
good.
It was
He's
so
very
stupid.
good. He did play much better against top.
Jason,
Oh.
he was real bad for 2 games.
I'm saying it was dumb coming into this year. I said a million times he was my
Oh,
favorite
we were very
quarterback.
high on Drew
Yeah.
Brees.
Favorite quarterback to draft coming into this season because he finally had weapons back. He didn't have an getting older Marquise Colston. He had a young, getting better, Michael Thomas. And so what Drew Brees did, he finished as the third
Michael
best.
Thomas?
Michael Thomas.
He finishes the third best quarterback, and Drew Brees is the only other guy. There's no third. But Tom Brady or Phillip Rivers. There's none of that. Drew Brees and Aaron Rodgers are the only 2 guys.
Phillip Rivers?
That's
where you went?
Well, who else? Ben Roethlisberger,
Andrew Luck?
Tom Brady. None of those guys have been consistent for a long period of time as a fantasy football top 3 type guy. Drew Brees is. He was the 3rd, 6th, 5th, 2nd, 1st, 2nd, 6th, 2nd, 1st quarterback going back the same all the way to 2008.
The splits are real, though.
5,200 yards, 37 touchdowns, 15 picks.
Splits are real.
Home, road.
It's really the home and the road because against top half defenses, he was actually much better than against bottom half. I assume that coincided with his road and away games.
He had a couple of those weird games that the home game against Detroit killed people. He was a playoff killer for a couple of weeks, depending on when your playoffs started. That's not going to sit well for people. Where's his ADP? Last year he was drafted.
He was
in the
super
middle,
late.
of the 4th.
I could grab him.
Was it
46? Yeah.
In drafts that we were in where you got smarter players, I could grab him 7th or 8th round sometimes last year. And so he
was late 5th.
Yeah.
We had the wrong. I think
he's
going to
go way up this year. We'll have to wait until his ADP to see whether he's drafted. But Drew Brees is good. There's no regression coming. His weapons are getting better. They're intact. I think we can move on now to Andrew Luck.
If Sean Payton is traded, I guess he won't be now because of all the coaching staff was our position. I retract my statement.
Yeah. Don't talk about that. All right, Andrew Luck. Andrew Luck is number 4. I've gone on record. He's one of my favorite players for next year at the quarterback position. He already finished number 4. I think the affordability of Andrew Luck and the top 3 potential of Andrew Luck make him a no-brainer. I mean, he was a 5th-round pick last year. This year, he's not going so far until 4th, late 4th, early 5th.
He'll be before Brees, though.
I would draft Andrew Luck in the 5th round.
Me too.
100%. You talked about drafting Aaron Rodgers there. You're not going to be able to.
Yeah.
But Andrew Luck, you might be able to.
Right.
And if my estimation is that Brady, Rodgers, Ryan will all go ahead of Andrew Luck.
Yeah,
I don't think Ryan will, but
Ryan
yeah.
probably.
Why wouldn't Ryan?
I agree that
Because people are going to listen to me come draft season, and I'll destroy him.
I mean, I can't see.
you're going to destroy him so you can draft him.
Brees, Brady, Rodgers will
I
go
don't
ahead of him, and then Luck and Ryan will be in similar.
Whenever
boats.
you have a guy whose career high is 32 touchdowns in 8 full seasons, and then he comes out and throws 38.
That's fair.
You're going to have him go back down to maybe his previous career high, which would put him.
But I remember this all season long from Jason. You're like, well, he's going into Denver. I don't believe in him. It's not going to happen. Crushes Denver. Well, he has Seattle next week on the road. There's no way crushes it in Seattle. You've been crushing him all year long. You were like, in the playoff games, like, well, Seattle's road, they're battle tested. They're going to go in. They're going to smash the Falcons. They got dismantled by Matt Ryan.
I'm going to put you on the spot,
All right,
Jay.
put me
It's
on the
January 18th.
All right.
Are you sure this is the hill you want to die on for the entire next year? Do you want to be on the Matt Ryan sucks bandwagon?
I think Matt Ryan is a good quarterback. I don't think he sucks. What I do think is that he is not a prolific touchdown thrower for his career, and I think he will regress to just to being a 30 touchdown guy, which is pretty good. But for fantasy
Not
football
good enough,
purposes,
no.
he is going to not perform to his ADP. That's like for me, it's a virtual guarantee that he is going to underperform his ADP next year.
All right.
And so I'm.
But
That's
even
where I'm
though
saying.
you just said his ADP would be much later because people would listen to you.
Well, I'm getting the ball rolling now. I'm starting downhill.
Contradictions. Beware. All right. Andrew Luck, he was very good. 4,200 yards, 31 touchdowns. Brought those interception totals back down to where you wanted to see them after he got that big contract and struggled last season. You know, he runs the ball, 64 attempts, 341 yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns. He was actually third in the league in consistency. He had a couple performances outside the top 21, but 10 of his 15 games were inside that top 10. He missed a game. And look, he was great. He took advantage of bad defenses. He had an offensive line that was atrocious.
And will always, forever and ever be atrocious.
I don't agree with that. They'll get things figured out. If you have a moderate improvement to that O-line with what Andrew Luck can do, will do. Moncrief was injured all year long. You still had Hilton set career highs. I'm telling you, Andrew Luck, I'm on board. He'll be my quarterback in a ton. Well, maybe not. If people listen to you, Jason, they might listen to me, and he's going to go higher.
There you go.
Kirk Cousins, number 5.
Oh,
Number
yeah.
5 was drafted.
Oh, yeah. Now we're in my range, baby.
You and Kirk.
Me and Kirk forever.
You know what's amazing about that is he burned you down in the playoffs.
I know.
I mean, he burned you down, and you're just loyal, infinitely loyal to Kirk.
I mean, we had one bad game. It came at the
At the worst time.
came at the worst possible time, but that's fine. He wasn't the only one who had bad games.
Here's something interesting: 329 passing yards against top defenses, 267 passing yards against bottom defenses. Obviously, he was one of the leaders in the league in terms of passing yardage in general, almost 5,000 yards. What is Kirk Cousins? Where should he be? I mean, I don't think anybody's drafting him as the number 5 quarterback next year.
No, and that's why Kirk Cousins is so glorious, because I think that's who he is. I think he is a 5 to 10 range quarterback that will always be drafted late because people don't like him.
Would you take Kirk Cousins or Russell Wilson next year?
I'll take Kirk Cousins.
Wow.
For
See,
average,
I would take Wilson.
For average draft position, I
Second
would
half
take,
only league,
I
right?
would I would
Exactly.
take Kirk Cousins.
Exactly.
If you're asking who finishes higher, I think Russell Wilson finishes higher. But Kirk Cousins is the first example here on our list of why you don't draft a quarterback early.
What you glossed over Matt Ryan?
Well, no,
Matt Ryan
I'm
was
saying-
drafted after Kirk Cousins.
I agree looking backwards. I'm saying looking forwards,
Oh,
I think
yes,
Matt
okay.
Ryan will be
All right.
drafted high, but Kirk won't. He just won't. People will not believe in him, and they never will. And so I agree with you, Mike, that he is going to perform fine for fantasy, and you're going to get him in the 10th round or, around that range.
Yeah, I mean, and 5, 6, 7, and 8 on this list. And this is so people at home understand this is the rankings based on half-point scoring, correct?
Well, that's regardless because they don't get half point. They get this is I believe, this is 4 point per touchdown though.
Yeah, standard scoring.
The next four,
that's the question.
Cousins, Prescott, Stafford, and Taylor were all drafted outside the top 100 picks and finished 5, 6, 7, 8.
Right.
And so that's just to add to your point.
Happens every year.
So Prescott, I mean, obviously undrafted for the most part.
Right.
He played 16 games. He only had 3,600 passing yards. But again, he was finding they were trusting him more and more to put up yardage towards the end of the season. So I don't really like looking at the season-ending stats for him as much as I do the consistency level. And for him, he was very consistent. He didn't really have any of those monster games. That was the one thing you never saw from Prescott. You never saw, a 4 touchdown plus a running touchdown, those Cam Newton type games from last year. But he could run it. He had 6 rushing touchdowns. And he played very, very well. I mean, so Dak Prescott is very curious to me for next season because obviously they're going to move on from Tony Romo. It'll be Prescott's job.
I like him a lot.
Yeah, I do too.
I have no idea, no barometer for this guy as to where he'll be drafted. I can't possibly get a grip on whether people will believe and draft him early or whether they'll think it was a rookie year and he'll have a sophomore slump and draft him late. It's entirely depending on that.
Is it Prescott or Dak Prescott or Kirk Cousins for you, Jason?
I would rather have the more consistent Dak Prescott than the more fiery Kirk Cousins.
You're talking about the guy who was in the top 10 times, Kirk Cousins?
Yeah, it's
I'm
hard to
talking
say
about
more
the guy-
consistent because Cousins was the third most consistent this year.
Yeah,
But
this
Prescott
season.
was, well, there's only one season for Prescott.
Yeah, but not for Kirk Cousins. We've seen him have big monster games. If you look at last year, he had big monster games and a lot of bad games as well.
Okay. All right. So you would take Prescott.
I would.
All right.
I would still take Cousins here, but I really like Dak moving into next year. The knock on him,
hard for me to trade in 1,300 yards
right,
for Dak.
And that's people. The knock on Dak right now, like, well, his passing attempts, they're low. The yardage is low. It reminds me exactly of Tony Romo.
Yeah.
When Tony Romo was dominant for fantasy purposes, because while I like attempts, I like a team that's going to throw a lot. I like a guy who is also hyper efficient with his pass attempts, and this is a guy who was building up his chemistry with his number one wide receiver. As much as I love Cole Beasley, clearly, I mean, Dez is the better talent, and once Dak starts going to Dez more, then I think his numbers are going to go up. I think he's over 4,000 next year.
All right. So let's talk about Stafford and Tyrod Taylor. There's 7-8 on this list. From a consistency perspective, Stafford was fairly consistent. He only had 24 touchdowns. It was a weird year for Stafford. Like, both of these guys, I look at them, and I see them at 7 and 8, and I just kind of, I have that smirk face that, huh?
I'm going to be
Like, it just doesn't feel like a top 10 year.
For Stafford?
Well, Stafford did in the beginning of the year.
Stafford was great to start.
No, I know. But I'm saying because of how he finished and because of how inconsistent Taylor was, by the way, 18th most consistent quarterback despite finishing number 8. That's brutal.
Tyrod Taylor.
I mean, Stafford, too. He had 5 of Stafford's games were outside the top 21. So you talk about a season where that's why I'm saying I look sideways at him and I go, huh?
How many of those games were the finger games?
The finger games.
Well,
once he broke, factored, man.
Once
that was
he broke
big,
his finger,
factor.
everything changed for him. He stopped throwing touchdowns, started throwing interceptions. Matthew Stafford, to me, is a guy that will probably, looking forward, he might be my number one target next year because he's going to go
fair.
very late. He lost Theo Riddick, which is a huge help.
Yeah, it did. He lost him.
And what was that stat about Theo Riddick?
That was the
was
one
that you?
Yeah, that was me.
I apologize.
Theo Riddick. Well, actually, technically, it was Kyle Baloney who
Oh,
found
it
this. It's
wasn't?
on our article on
He has a first
thefantasyfootballers.com.
name.
Kyle Baloney.
Yeah, my Baloney has a first name. It's spelled Kyle. So, anyways, you're welcome out there.
That's
Kyle.
our lead editor
Yes.
on the website.
It sure is.
It's a
Highly respected.
and great food if you're in a prison.
Yes, also that. Anyways, Theo Riddick missed 5 games. He missed a third of the season, and he was the league leader in touchdown receptions at the running back position. That's incredible.
That's good.
And you miss that, you break your finger. Matthew Stafford started the year on absolute fire and had things, not break his way. And so looking next year, I think Matthew Stafford is a guy I'll target.
I agree. I think he'll be one of my targets as well with Cousins. But the thing about Stafford is it always seems to fall apart at some point.
That's true.
So
And normally it's December.
Yes.
Oh,
So you can blame the finger, but he's
So
got a
trade-
bad run. He's got a bad history
This
in
is
December.
what you do. You
Draft Stafford, trade him for Russell Wilson.
for the second half. Yeah, Stafford starts hot. We'll talk about Wilson in a minute. Taylor, I mean,
who knows where he's going
only
to be?
3,000 passing yards, 17 touchdowns. It was all about the running game, 580 rushing yards and 6 rushing touchdowns. Are they committed to him? Are they not committed to him?
It appears like it's almost a lock that they're going to cut him from news reports, which is surprising to me. But everything
Is that a Tony Romo destination?
Buffalo?
Yeah.
Ooh, my Sammy Watkins dynasty ownership says yes, please.
I would say no. If there was the reports, one of the Dallas beat reporters was saying they're probably going to end up cutting him, Romo. That was his prediction anyways. I don't know if that's going to happen or if he'll get traded. But it's I mean, that's
Houston?
It makes sense. Houston, they still have to eat that Brock contract. I don't know if you can pay that much to just the quarterback position. That would be great. Tony Romo in Houston would be glorious.
9 and 10 on this list, Blake Bortles and Russell Wilson, or as we call him,
Russell Wilson.
Look, Wilson doesn't belong at 10 to me.
That's what his numbers put him.
No, I know. But
this isn't an argument
didn't
list. These are facts.
Didn't you just tell me a story about a finger?
Yeah.
Once upon a time?
Let's hear a story about some ankles.
Yeah, I mean,
knee.
Russell Wilson's start compared to his finish was just a different level. Obviously, losing Lockett, who knows whether he'll be back at the beginning of next year.
Right. Well, yeah, the
when
reports
Wilson,
are he will.
It was the rushing. It was the rushing yardage that went down. He didn't get out of the pocket. He couldn't run. That killed his fantasy value, yet he still finished as a top 10 fantasy quarterback. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about Bortles first. Number 9.
How is Bortles number 9? It's so the garbage man can.
Look, Bortles pieced. I mean, remember that game against Tennessee?
Where he played
The
pretty
worst
much the worst
football
game I've
game?
ever seen in my life, and then finished with like 350 and 3 touchdowns.
Now,
But is he a candidate with the weapons in place? If Chip Kelly went there, even if he doesn't, you got a new head coach. He played okay at the very end of the year.
Marquise
He's
Lee
young.
stepping up his game.
Allen Robinson, Marquise Lee, Allen Hearns.
the reports
Julius
that he
Thomas,
was playing
Yeldon.
through a multiple times of separating his shoulder. I believe an elbow injury. I mean, there's things that make sense. The regression was completely expected for Blake Bortles. He wasn't going to repeat the
And
numbers.
we said
from
it
2 years ago.
all last year.
But to go from what he was, where he was, evolving into maybe an okay quarterback, to go to you're just an embarrassment on the field, there has to be reasons for these things happening, and maybe it was the injury.
There is massive risk with Bortles. Now, fortunately,
Maybe. Well, it depends on what are you going to have to pay in the draft for
sure.
Bortles.
Well, and yeah, I'm speaking in terms of like Bortles. If he played very poorly for the first 4 games next year, there's no reason they wouldn't switch off of him.
Oh, for the team?
Yeah, the team.
Right.
The team could.
I
bench
see
him.
what you mean.
I'm just saying, he's the first guy on this list that could happen to. But that being said, we saw what he did. We saw what he did a year ago. We saw the potential he has, and we know the weapons. He has to get his mechanics right. Apparently, the shoulder's an issue. If I played like that, I'd be blaming shoulders, elbows, knees, and toes. I mean, it would be everything would be hurt for me. He was terrible against good passing defenses. Only 200 yards and 1 touchdown on average against top passing defenses.
That's pretty average, normal for Bortles there. He eats up on bad defenses.
Well, yeah, but that's a mark against him.
Yeah, I
Bortles
agree.
can't be. I don't think he's the type of guy
Never
that
a
next
top
year
2 performance, by the way.
can ever be trusted as a weekly plug and play starter. Right? We're going from guys, that Matt Ryan or Drew Brees or even Russell Wilson, if he's healthy, should be able to be an every week starter. Bortles is a streamer. You have to play the matchups with Bortles, and obviously, considering he finishes the number 9 quarterback this season, despite having an atrocious season, he's got those big games where you can look and say this matchup is winnable. Play him. So draft wise,
And he runs the ball a little bit.
Next year, grab him late and pair him with someone else.
So
and you should be fine.
The latest fantasy football calculator draft, he was the 14th quarterback off the board.
Yeah, so no risk.
Yeah, that's
Russell Wilson
none.
is number 10. Would you take Russell Wilson, or would you rather have Stafford or Prescott next year? Now, you got to remember, Wilson went as high as 32 in standard
right.
leagues.
Yeah, he was the new hotness. I wonder if people will look at his final finish and take that as that's
People
what
got
who he
burned this year
Yeah,
after
badly.
drafting him high last year.
Wilson
that means next
and-
year he'll be
Same story with Newton.
Right.
Wilson and Newton are the two most interesting draft quarterbacks for me because both have shown you top 3 years. And Wilson's done it for multiple years at the top 3.
Russell Wilson is going to be a great draft pick next year.
Yeah.
Last year, we're not exactly 100% sure why. I just looked up the numbers. So between weeks 1 and 9, last season, he was the 17th ranked quarterback.
We talking Wilson?
Russell Wilson. This year, between weeks 1 and 9, he was the 17th ranked quarterback, identical, right? The second half of last year, he finished as the number 2 quarterback during that time. Second half of this year, the number 4 quarterback. What I like about it is, one, people got burned in their drafts, and the first half of this year, the continuation from his hotness last year, there's reason. There was all the injuries where he was an immobile pocket quarterback that looked like he couldn't move and he didn't have an offensive line to protect him. Once he was mobile, he got it going again and looked like last year. So I think next year, we've already seen Russell Wilson, as Andy said, finish as a top 3 fantasy quarterback before. I think he's going to be a great pick next year.
Yeah. I'm excited about a bounce back year, hopefully something that lasts the entire year and we don't have a 3rd straight year of him being a 17th ranked guy to start the year because you can't stick with that. That's the problem. You draft that and you pay – if you paid a draft premium, now I think he'll go in the 6th round. I think he'll go in the 6th or 7th round in this next year, which I'm happy to pay.
Yeah.
So
7th round, I've already got a good team that I've drafted in those first 6 picks, and I can take a gamble on a high upside quarterback like Wilson.
And I'd rather, if I knew I could get Wilson in the 7th round versus that when I said Luck in the 5th earlier, I'd probably take Wilson in the 7th.
Yeah, grab 2 more good players.
All right, we're back out of the top 10 here. We have Derek Carr, Andy Dalton, Marcus Mariota, Phillip Rivers, and Tom Brady. Kind of an outlier down there thanks to the 12 games. So let's talk about these guys here. The things that stick out to me were the consistency of Andy Dalton and Phillip Rivers. They finished 12 and 14, but their consistency was 18 and 24. Who's the most disappointing? Or do you kind of just say, okay, he didn't have Keenan Allen, he didn't have Danny Woodhead, so who cares about Rivers? And Dalton didn't have A.J. Green, and Dalton didn't have Gio Bernard. I mean, it's kind of similar situations for those two guys.
Rivers disappoints me more than Dalton did. For me, when I look, not only did you not have A.J. Green, but you also lost Mohamed Sanu and Marvin Jones. I mean, he was going. We knew it was going to be tough sledding for Andy Dalton. He lost his top 3 wide receivers from last year. Phillip Rivers still had a good core of wide receivers to throw to, minus Keenan Allen, and Rivers was a touchdown machine. To me, Andy Dalton showed. There were times this year where I saw him be what I think he is, which is a pretty darn good quarterback. I expect A.J. Green to be back. I expect, you're not going to have rookie year Tyler Boyd being kind of shunned as a rookie, and they'll probably address the position further this offseason. So next year, Andy Dalton is a guy to me that is always undervalued and is a good quarterback. If they can get weapons for him, I'll like him.
Derek Carr obviously slipped down the list. He had a great start. Almost 4,000 yards, 28 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions, which was impressive to me. He's really maturing and growing, and one of those guys that you can certainly look at and say, hey, he could be a top 8 quarterback easily.
Could be.
He missed a game.
He could be. And he still has he eats against bad defenses.
Yeah.
Almost 300 yards a game against bad defenses, but top half defenses, 230 yards. I mean, those are pretty substantial differences where I like Carr. I think that he could be there one day, but you're going to have to.
One of the best offensive lines in football.
Right.
2 great pass-catching weapons in Amari Cooper and Michael Crabtree. Great pass-catching running backs as a trio of them.
But you can't count on him against great defenses.
Right. Not
and
yet.
He plays Denver twice, and he plays the Chiefs twice.
Yeah. That's 4 of your 12.
Possibly.
It could be 4 of your 12 games.
Yep.
We talked about Dalton. Marcus Mariota.
The last thing I wanted to say about Dalton was this year he threw about 7 touchdowns less than his average. If you average out his first 5 years, 7 touchdowns down. So if you put those, that if he just threw it, if he had
just
an average year, he'd be fine.
I think if you're listening and you hear some of these same phrases, which is, he could, this guy can come back next year. Derek Carr could be top 8. Andy Dalton, he's got reason to bounce back to the mean. Phillip Rivers, you got Keenan Allen back. You're getting the picture, right, at the quarterback position, because we haven't even talked about Mariota and Brady and Winston and Newton and Roethlisberger. These are guys not even mentioned. Eli Manning, there's 20 names.
He should not be mentioned, Eli Manning.
Okay.
Gross this year.
He was
gross.
terrible.
Yeah, he was really bad.
Forget fantasy. You just watch the game.
He must have been on a boat every week.
Marcus Mariota, 15 games, sat a game, obviously the injury. But Mariota finished 13th, was the 9th most consistent, had a couple top 2 performances, so those monster games where, for the record, Dalton, Rivers, Bortles, none. Those guys never put up a top 2 performance. Mariota did that twice. It was in the passing game, right? 26 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, looked great, built a rapport with Rashard Matthews, but still had some games that were let you down.
Yeah, Marcus Mariota, it reminds me that the situation is very similar to Dak in that, you have a decently mobile guy. The offense is not built on his back. It's built on the running game. But Dak has Des Bryant, and Marcus Mariota has Rashard Matthews. While I like Matthews,
he's no Des Bryant.
He's not Des Bryant. And I don't think that they will have it. Maybe they draft one. They've got some good picks in this upcoming year. So maybe that's what they do, and they address that situation. But I feel like Mariota, I think he's going to be drafted too high for me. I think he'll
really?
Yeah. I think people are going to latch onto him this offseason.
Yeah,
especially if they pick up a stud wide receiver.
He's probably going to end up around the Stafford area. And so it sounds like you guys would be much more excited about drafting Stafford than you would be Mariota.
Yeah, I would.
I probably would as well. I'm not quite as down on Mariota as
I'm not down on him. He impressed me a lot. But
the reality is here. You just said it. We haven't talked about Brady or Cam Newton or Roethlisberger or Winston. There's just so many quarterbacks. You don't need. I'm fine with just about anyone we have mentioned. Obviously, no Eli Manning, and Tyrod Taylor might not even have a team. We don't know yet. But otherwise, give me any of them. And
then I don't remember, Andy, who you were saying. You're like, well, the yardage is just gross. You have Marcus Mariota against top 16 defenses, averaging 190 passing yards. Now I know he has the 22 rushing yards. It was Tyrod Taylor. He has 22 rushing yards. That kind of balances things out a little bit. That's you're adding basically 50 yards, 50 passing yards with those rushing yards. But it's I don't think that I don't think it's going to be there next year for Mariota to be that top level fantasy quarterback.
All right, I want to talk about Tom Brady. He may be the last quarterback we discuss on today's show. Brady ended up at 15. We know the story. He was suspended. We also know the impact that Rob Gronkowski has. And I'm looking at his splits, right? Because the story about Brady is obviously, he can win you any week. He has those monster performances. This year, the story was a couple of things. You had 18 rushing touchdowns from LeGarrette Blount. You had Rob Gronkowski's injury. If you look at the splits with Gronkowski this year, without Gronkowski this year, it's about a 3-point difference for Brady. You drag that back to 2011 until now, with and without Gronkowski, it's about a 3-point difference. When Gronkowski's there, he averages about 3 more points fantasy-wise than when he's gone. And so that impact, but it's not a devastating impact. What is Brady next year? Because he ended up the 9th most consistent despite missing the 4 games. So obviously, he puts up numbers.
Right.
I think he's probably going to be overdrafted next year because he'll be one of the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks drafted. And while he is good, I wouldn't give up the capital it will cost to get Brady, who is not a fantasy elite guy. When you look at
Brees.
Yeah, I would take Brees. Brees will go much, maybe not much later, but he'll go later. And Brees is just, they are a passing team.
Brady or Matt Ryan?
Oof.
Jason's just staring me down.
Oh, man. Brady or Matt Ryan, I'll take It depends on how far I can get Matt Ryan to drop. I would rather take Matt Ryan, 3 rounds later. But if they're near the same, I'm taking Tom Brady.
Yeah, if they're near the same,
I'll pass both. All that means is if they're near the same, because I know Brady's going to be high, that means Matt Ryan's going to be high, and I'll pass both.
All right. So Brady ended at 15, 9th most consistent, missed the 4 games, obviously belongs in that upper echelon with Rodgers, Ryan, Luck, Brees. I guess, Jason doesn't like Matt Ryan, but,
Hey, man. Hey, these things happen.
I think Matt Ryan's good. I think Matt Ryan will be a 6 to 10 quarterback next year in fantasy.
I'm just going to throw some other names out there just for your understanding of where guys finished. Winston was 16, Newton was 17, Big Ben was 18. If you remember how high he was drafted, way too high. 53 was his ADP in standard leagues.
Our listeners didn't draft him. We gave massive warnings on Big Ben.
Yeah, and we were really ripped for that.
Oh, because the beginning of the year, didn't Big Ben start with a game or two that was just amazing, and then it was like, oh man.
Let me guess. Was he playing at home?
Before the season started, we were being ripped for our Big Ben thoughts. Carson Palmer was 19.
So just to accentuate, Big Ben played 6 games at home, 8 games on the road.
Are you looking at the splits?
At home this season. This is just this season,
right?
And this is not a outlier. You can go back many years for Big Ben, but this year the 6 games at home, over 31 points a game. On the road, just over 16 points a game.
That's about it.
Cut his production in half, and that's what he gives you on the road.
Week 1 and 2, he had 3 touchdowns in week 1, 3 touchdowns week 2. I was feeling like a dummy for saying don't draft Big Ben when he was in the 5th round. And the best part about Big Ben is that he will be drafted so high. He's a Hall of Fame quarterback. He's going to go so high. It's just a free bypass pick.
And it makes no sense. How is he that bad on the road?
Other than Big Ben and Brees, we should walk through some of the other quarterbacks on our own and see if we can find any monster home road split guys that we're not maybe as aware of. Because it seems to be like something that persists through years. I mean, you look at Brees for the last 6 years, he's 8 points better at home.
And the deal is most guys, of course, they're going to be better at home, but not half of your production.
Right. Yeah, that's insane.
Better at home.
That's insane. All right, Carson Palmer was 19, Flacco 20. And that's probably where I'm going to stop.
So Carson Palmer, do you think that he can return to being a quarterback 1? I mean, look, the numbers. Oh, still over 4,000 yards, but just 26 touchdowns.
If John Brown is healthy and ready for 16 games, Carson Palmer will be fine.
If he's not, I don't think he can return to that. I think he's a 13 to 15 guy next year with if Fitzgerald comes back, if Brown comes back. I really don't. I think the way that the team has changed with David Johnson being the team, the offense, the structure of the offense, and the reason I say that too is because Palmer was just more mistake prone this year.
Man,
it wasn't just all related to losing John Brown. It was bad decisions, and I think you're going to have to minimize those with just less attempts. So I think of him as a 12 to 15 guy.
Yeah, but he had 9 fumbles.
Yeah,
that's 9
and 14 picks. So
that's pretty solid work there by a quarterback to fumble 9 times.
That sounds like
Kurt Warner.
I love Michael Keaton. All right, well, that does it for today's episode. We'll talk through some tight ends. If you guys have thoughts, reach out on Twitter at the FF Ballers. You can find us on the web at thefantasyfootballers.com. A ton of new articles always hitting the website all off season long. And check out our community at jointhefoot.com. Help support our independent podcast. Reviews on iTunes help a lot too. We appreciate your listenership and your support. And stay tuned for the show after the show on YouTube.
And always check out fantasyjocks.com. The code is footballers. It's where winners go. We'll see you on Thursday. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Fantasy Footballers Podcast. Join our fantasy football community on jointhefoot.com and follow us on Twitter at the FF Ballers.